Bonsoir à tous.
Good evening all. Good evening.
Nous voilà réunis.
So here we are together.
Encore une fois en web conference.
Once again,
Nous sommes,
a web conference.
désolés, nous aurions préféré
Sorry about that. We'd like to be together
physiquement à l'Hôtel Dieu comme ça.
at Hôtel Dieu as was planned,
Ce sera pour l'année prochaine.
but that'll be next year.
Un cocktail et éventuellement d'une coupe de champagne. Nous sommes sûrs que nous
A glass of champagne. I'm sure that we'll enjoy that much better when we're all happy, vaccinated, and seen the back of this virus. But for this year, we're going to continue our exchanges in the webinar format. So, where to go? Let's try to go fairly quickly over the history of 2020 because you've already received the universal registration document. We've already had a post-results publication webinar, and we want to leave you as much time as possible for you to ask your questions, because apparently there are a lot of questions, and we will try to answer all of those questions. So, physically, we are in Opaline's offices, so the communications agency of Thermador Group in Saint-Quentin-Fallavier, and physically there are 8 people here, including the scrutineers, who've been kind enough to join us physically here. So Patricia Mavigny, of course, Jean-François Bonnefond, who will be talking to us a little later, Leon Monroe, who will also be saying a few words, Olivier de la Clergerie, our independent administrator, board member, who will be here, and Arlette Bolioki, the boss of Opaline, Adrien and Thomas, who are technical staff, and Neil, who is our interpreter, our favourite interpreter for our English language listeners, and Thomas, who is keeping an eye on us from a distance as IT backup. And there's Nicolas as well, of course. Don't forget Nicolas. Ah, I said Thomas twice. Okay, thank you to Nicolas for being here too. So, Patricia, can we actually hold this meeting? Yes, we can hold it behind closed doors. This is a mixed assembly, so we need 25% quorum, and we have that, because in fact we have a participation rate of 71.52%. So that's the highest level we've had for, I don't know, since the group began. So very high number of voters. We've got 1,078 shareholders who voted out of a total of over 7,000. So we've got 20.68 voting rights as given as powers to the chairman. In the presence of that said chairman, Guillaume Robin, scrutineers Jean-François Bonnefond, who's deputy CEO of Thermador Group and chairman of Jetly, Olivier Villemont de la Clergerie, who's an independent board member, and I will be the secretary for this OGM. So the meeting indeed can take place normally. And so over to the chairman, Guillaume. So we declare this meeting open. So there's 117 people listening to this. You have a chat area on the webinar, so you can exchange comments and say what you really think about Thermador Group. And there's a question and answer area, so please enter your questions there. I can see it's already flashing. It's live, and we will answer those questions after this meeting. So, we're going to start with our employees, as every year. A particular thought for 2 employees on long-term illness. That's Alexis and Frédéric. So, we're thinking about them, both of them, hoping that they're watching us tonight, and we hope they get well soon, and they come back to work as soon as possible. So, you'll see the number of employees in the group increased once again last year with the arrival of new companies, Thermacom arrived in 2020, but also positive recruitment, more recruitments than departures, because our subsidiaries are confident about the future and they've got a lot of projects in the pipeline. And most of these recruitments have been in France, 24 people all in France. So thanks to our employees, of course I've already done that, but I don't hesitate to do it again. Thank them for their commitment, their courage, their professionalism during this very difficult period. Extremely chaotic, as you'll see on the next graph, turnover, consolidated turnover month by month in 2020. And I feel that's the best way to show you how chaotic it's been and how difficult it's been for our employees, because you can imagine that when you have to manage a dip in turnover in April of around 40% and then an increase in turnover just 2 months later of about 25%, you can imagine how difficult it is to manage that in terms of logistics and customer service. And it was worse in some subsidiaries. You'll see it on this graph. This is the retail sector, where we had discrepancies of -60 to +60, so you can imagine just how complicated that was for our employees to satisfy our customers. So once again, thank you to them. So we managed to achieve turnover higher than last year, and of course in March we couldn't imagine that would have been possible. Yeah, but we did manage that, and in particular thanks to our retail section, which increased more than 12%. So very good performance for those retail activities, good resilience of the group overall, due partly to the fact that we're present in several different markets, industry, construction, etc., which are very different markets, and also different distribution channels, so B2B, retail, web, of course. So this great diversity of markets and channels means that the group is resilient, as well as the quality of our staff, as I talked about before. Resilience too, in terms of profit. We have an increase in profit, in net profit, which sees us ending the year with a record net profit of 36.2 million. So, the milestones of 2020, you'll find them in the Universal Reference document that you've received either by post or you've consulted on the web. All this information in this document reviews these milestones, of course, and the URD emphasizes several developments, interesting developments, particularly in terms of figures and the financial aspects. So that's on page 17. It's got more information on that page. Patricia will talk about that more in detail. Our non-financial performance statement between pages 49 to 54. We've got more information on that page and new indicators, as our indicators have been asking for. And a new page, page 84, which talks about the risk of pandemics. And that explains how we were able to resist during those difficult times, and shows how in the future we will be able to resist in the future. So the key events of 2020, an increase in capital during the fluctuating market. Our employees went with an increase in capital of 1% that we talked about last year at the meeting, and we asked you to authorize that last year. They did it right in the middle of this tumultuous times of the stock exchange, and it was completely subscribed to, and our shareholders contributed more than 2 million euros under great conditions, of course. There was a 40% discount, as the PACT law allows, but it needed courage to do that. So it was a big event in Thermador Group in 2020. I'll talk about that again later a little bit. It allowed us to increase the share of employees in our capital. Also, the purchase of Thermacome in April, and in spite of this event, the post-negotiation allowed us to complete the deal, and we're happy about that. And we've got a PB-Tube project as well, which is really interesting. So great growth in retail, 12%, and that's a real milestone, and exceptional growth for ILO, our subsidiary, which delivers to the swimming pool industry. It's no longer a startup because it was above 12 million euros, with growth above 40% on a very dynamic market, but also thanks to the determination and the professionalism of their staff and their ability to find the products they needed. There's also subsidies from the state for renovation projects for energy conservation. There's the MaPrimeRénov' is one of those things, and our subsidiary Thermador, who sells accessories in the field of renewables, really made the most of that initiative. So great resistance, and actually increased their turnover, which was not easy. And we'll see at the end of the webinar how Thermador is doing. So very positive thing. But in terms of new builds and planning permission requests, it's getting worse. It got worse from the beginning of the crisis in April. And for PB-Tube and Thermacome, this will be a negative element, of course, this year. We hope that will level out, bottom out in 2021, but it's a negative marker, of course, for the moment. So our major customers had a drop in the professional sector of 2.8%, whereas our retail subsidiaries reported growth of 6.2%, which is exceptional. French people really took interest in their homes and their gardens, and so those retail products really did well. Lots of watering pumps, accessories for the pools and so forth. Internationally, slow down, of course. Lionel will talk about that a bit later. A slowdown due to the difficulties of travel, of course. We weren't able to visit our international customers, and so far from our eyes, far from our minds, and so they were not as interested in purchasing our products during that time. And that explains the drop in the share of international business, which is now only 18%, which previously last year was 19%, above 19%. But I think as soon as the crisis is over, i.e. in a few months' time, we'll be able to get back on the road again and visit possible customers internationally. A few words about governance. 3 simple indicators we use. The attendance rate at board meetings. As you see on the slide, they're very assiduous. And of course we needed them a lot last year, a lot of meetings. Secondly, the attendance rate at the AGM, very proud that we've got This reflects our democracy, I think, and the proportion of capital held by employees and former employees, which shows there's good dialogue between the stakeholders. And it's clear that an employee who is a shareholder has a different vision about his job than a normal employee. There's an important development this year in terms of governance. We've got the audit committee, which is headed up by Karine Gaudin, and so they go into the detail of our accounts, and they produce a summary for the board of directors of the accounts. And we also wanted to have an earnings committee, and that now exists, and that's more and more technical question. And we'll see in the resolutions that there is a question about the question of directors' earnings are addressed. So we created that earnings committee in order to train us and specialize us and help us, support us around Laurence Paganini, Yanis Rentrop, Karine Mignon, and Naomi Gonin, who's an employee member. We've also created a Sustainable Development Committee to increase our knowledge, the board's knowledge of those subjects about the environment. And we know that the regulations are very complex and they're evolving permanently. So we've appointed Maltide Yagoubi as chairman of that committee. And she'll be assisted by Laurence Paganini and Olivier de Clergier as independent board members. And we'll have Yves Rugier, the boss of Thermador, and a board member, and Patricia Mavigny, who is secretary of the board. You know, and she looks after the transversal group, the cross-departmental group. And we've got an IT specialist there along with us as well. I won't say more about that because Patricia will be talking about that a little later. Okay, so that's for governance and non-financial. She's going to continue now. Patricia's going to continue with non-financial aspects for the next slides. So, as we start, as we said at the beginning of this meeting, the interesting thing for the year was the stability of our teams, of our staff, and of course we were able to test that commitment during the crisis of 2020. So once again, average length of service, which is high, and which is above 9 years. We're not far off 10 years, so that's important for us. We continue to recruit, and we also managed to keep the skills we already have in-house. The second thing is training. Training is important, and it helps, and we go beyond the legal requirement in terms of expenditure. We want our employees to stay with us, of course, so we develop their skills, and hence the importance of this training, which could be internal or external. 59% of employees were trained in 2020. Then absenteeism, sorry. A lot of employees who are in the logistics activity or their offices, and these they're covered by these numbers because we see that as an element of the quality of life at work, and so this indicator is fairly stable compared to the year before, 3.9%, and is low. The last indicator is very important for me. It's the place of women in Thermador Group. it was always important for Guy Vincent to have diversity, and the role of women is reflected by our Place of Women Professional Inequality Index, which is improved substantially, is now at 87 out of 100. And I would also emphasise another indicator which isn't on this slide, is the place of women in the management committees and boards of the subsidiaries. 34% of managers are women, of executives are women. So the key extra non-financial figures, environment is part of the group's DNA. We've always worked to improve our contribution to the climate. The share of renewable energy of the group is now 65%, which is an improvement compared to last year and the previous years. That's all consumption, electrical consumption, of course, which is used and that we get through green energy electricity contracts. Second is the proportion of LED lighting in our buildings, which reduces expenditure. Since 2009, we started installing LED lights in the warehouses, and now more than 59% of our subsidiaries' warehouses are lit by LED lighting. The other indicator is waste recovery. So it's a distribution company. We buy, we sell, and of course in the logistics part we have a lot of waste, packaging, cardboard, paper, etc. And so we have a channel which allows us to recover this waste, which can be reused or resold. And now we've reached 85% on that indicator, which is up again compared to last year. So our commitment for tomorrow, and that's something that's will be overseen by the Sustainable Development Committee. A lot of our products are distributed that have a positive impact on the environment in terms of less electricity consumption, less use of fossil fuels, and which bring energy savings. So it's very important to us to identify a strategy in the next period of 2 to 5 years with clear objectives, and to be able to have an inventory whereby we categorize our products with a score in terms of carbon impact. And we've got this project, 4 subsidiaries, we're working on that, and it will be overseen by Philippe Klein, and that's part of the Sustainable Development Committee's works. It's very important to me, and it'll obviously oblige us to work very closely with our suppliers, because of course it'll affect how our products are presented and sold. Now we're going to the key financial figures. So it's a distribution company, and in a distribution company we talked about the members of staff, of course, but stock is important, and it's one of the values of our group. And in 2020, the fact that we chose to have high levels of stock allowed us indeed to meet the needs of our customers and the big fluctuations of demand. And at the end of December it was 119.5 million euros of stock, which was down a bit. We believe that level is a bit low in order to be able to accompany the development of business in 2021. We did plan, we started to work on, in fact, a stock reduction exercise to improve our cash requirement, to manage our cash requirements better. So we started buying again in order to be able to continue our business in 2021 and respond to the market needs. The other key element is equity, shareholders' equity. Thermador Group has a solid balance sheet. It's illustrated the size of sales equity, which is 224.8 million, because we've distributed dividends, but we've also allocated to reserves some of the results, and so that gives us this financial solidity. And there's two important elements, which is cash and debt. So when the crisis struck last year, the same date last year in 2020, there were a lot of questions about our cash position. Were we going to have enough cash to be able to accompany the crisis, get through the crisis? And now we can tell you that we managed the cash well, with very close monitoring and work with our subsidiaries, because we've got a cash position of almost 40 million. So the net treasury, net cash flow, which is cash minus debt, positive net cash position of 0.5 million. We took out a loan of 7 million for the purchase of Thermacome. That's one of the elements that came into play in 2020. And we think that situation will continue to improve, that ratio will continue to improve in 2021. There are two key ratios we look at. The first is the ROCE, the return on capital employed. And that's called the ROCE, R-O-C-E. The second indicator is operating income over turnover. For the ROCE, we're up 6%. And the improvement is due to three elements. The first is improved profit level. Second is the increase of cash stock, 39 million. And the third is the reduction in our debt, which you saw there for 2020. And then operating income over turnover, and it's 12.8%. It's pretty stable compared to 2019. We think it's a good performance, because Guillaume talked about, when he talked about turnover, we have a greater share of retail activities in our turnover, and this retail activity is slightly less profitable than the professional sector, which suggests that the trading result over turnover is actually quite a good performance at 12.8%. So now over to Guillaume about the breakdown of capital. So some changes in 2020. As you know, every year we do a complete survey about all the shareholders of the group, so we have a good idea of who our shareholders are. And the survey shows that the share of private shareholders increased, because now it's 40% individual shareholders. The share of institutional investors has dropped slightly to 46%. What we've noted that the number of investors has gone down substantially, but the share has not gone down so much. So the investors who were already present in our capital at the beginning of the year reinforced their positions during the health crisis, showed trust in us, and showing their belief that the group could get through this difficult period. So I think we convinced them. So that's the institutional investors. The share of foreign investors is above 23%. Our German, biggest investor is above 9%. So private shareholders, 40%. So you've got retired employees who represent 4.3% of capital. There's also a founder of the group, of course, who left the board. The founder of the group, Guy Vincent, who now becomes a normal, shall we say, individual shareholder. And that explains why that number has gone up to 40%. And that explains also the slight drop in the executives, board members and personnel proportion. So the key point is symbolic, of course, but it's just something that we want to follow over time. And active employees plus the FCPE mutual fund plus retired employees, 9%. So that's up from last year. We've got that, of course, the objective of getting to 10%, and we hope that we get over that threshold in the years ahead. So in terms of volumes, trading volumes, surprisingly busy year. In terms of the number of shares sold, traded, and as you see between 2018, 2019, 2020, a very, very big increase in terms of trading volumes. On average, to illustrate that, in 2020, over 8,000 Thermador Group shares were traded per day. In any event, it's a good news for Thermador Group. It's one of the key points for investors to have a company as the ability to have shares that allow people to enter and leave the capital in the company, and we see that as a positive point for the group. So, prospects, a sunny horizon, not because it's the summer is on the not because summer is on the horizon, but we think that we're optimistic as entrepreneurs, of course. So the 10-year timeline has not really changed. We see that on page 1011 on the reference document. We hope to double in size in 10 years. And so that objective remains unchanged in spite of this strange year. In these objectives and strategies that you're going to be able to read about in the Universal Registration document, you'll see that we've added a few key points. International development is a priority. Equal treatment of men and women. The arrival of more women in positions of responsibility in Thermador Group over the 10 to 15 years ahead. And of course we can't, it'll take some time because we can't sack men to make room for women. On the board, we've been able to change things fairly quickly, the balance fairly quickly, because of course the terms of office, the mandates are fairly short. But we're determined to work on that. We've also added IT security. A lot of companies have been hacked, of course, in 2020. Some have had real problems with that. So we've increased, we will be increasing security in that area. External growth in 2021 is not going to be an active item in 2021. We are focusing on the onboarding of recently acquired subsidiaries, particularly Rousseau, with the project to merge them with DIPRA, the move for FG Inox, which is planned at the beginning of next year. The IT migration is already done, logistics already done, is in progress, sorry. PB-Tube and Thermacome will be moving closer together from an IT point of view. So these projects require resources, of course, so we need to allocate those carefully. And capital, of course, it needs capital. And that's the financial director talking. So, of course,
bien dotés, pas endettés.
We've got good levels of capital. We're not very badly indebted, of course, so the position is pretty good.
Ce sujet-là, tout serait facile, mais je dirais que les sujets les plus délicats,
But the more complex subjects is the motivation of our teams to make a success of these onboarding operations with these new companies, and the ability to bring all these people in it, pushing it on the same direction. A big element is going to be inflation. We've had a lot of questions on the forum already about inflation. We believe there will be strong inflation, and we've already applied that in some of our prices. There'll be a second wave of that because of the increase in raw material prices and the price of containers coming in. So we're imagining inflation of 5-6%, which we haven't seen in Thermador Group for a very long time, of course. However, in terms of new builds, we think that 2021 will be still a pretty flat year, and we hope that that will bottom out during 2021. We'll keep you informed on those subjects. The next webinar will be after the first quarter report webinar. So the state subsidies to improve energy transition, they'll be with us in 2021, but in the 5 years to come. And that's good for our subsidiary Thermador. So those are the prospects. We want now to hand over to our auditors, who will be that's Cabinet Mazars and Cabinet Royer, and their two representatives will be presenting their reports on our accounts, including the special report on regulated agreements. I want to thank Stéphane Guichard from Cabinet Royer, has been with us, working with us for 6 years, and now he's going to hand over to Serge Biot from the same firm. But there will be another auditor signing the accounts in the future for Thermador Group, and we want to thank him for his professionalism, for his accompaniment during all these 6 years. So I think it's maybe he's going to.
Mesdames, Messieurs les actionnaires, bonjour. J'ai le plaisir de vous présenter au nom du Collège des commissaires aux comptes les rapports que nous avons établis à votre attention. Ces rapports ont été mis à votre disposition par votre société. Comme le veut l'usage de cette assemblée, je vous propose donc de ne pas les lire intégralement et de limiter mes commentaires aux rapports relatifs aux résolutions soumises à votre approbation aujourd'hui. Les rapports sont au nombre de 3. 2 relatifs aux comptes et 1 relatif aux conventions et engagements réglementés. Je commencerai par le rapport sur les comptes annuels qui fait l'objet de la première résolution. Ces rapports ont été préparés selon le référentiel comptable français. Et nous avons considéré l'évaluation des titres de participation comme le point clé de l'audit. Les titres de participation et créances rattachées représentent 91% du pied de bilan, soit 139,8 millions d'euros au 31 décembre 2020. En conclusion de nos travaux, nous certifions que les comptes annuels sont réguliers, sincères et donnent une image fidèle du résultat ainsi que de la situation financière et du patrimoine de la société. Je poursuivrai sur les comptes consolidés qui font l'objet de la deuxième résolution. Ceux-ci ont été préparés selon le référentiel IFRS. Nous avons considéré comme point clé de l'audit l'évaluation des écarts d'acquisition inscrits au bilan pour une valeur de 56,3 millions d'euros au 31 décembre 2020 et l'évaluation des stocks de marchandises qui figurent au bilan consolidé pour un montant net de 119,5 millions d'euros. En conclusion de nos travaux, nous certifions que les comptes consolidés sont réguliers, sincères et donnent une image fidèle du résultat ainsi que de la situation financière et du patrimoine. Mesdames, Messieurs les actionnaires, Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie pour votre attention et je passe la parole à mon confrère pour la lecture du rapport sur les conventions et engagements réglementés.
Bonjour. En notre qualité de commissaire aux comptes de votre société, nous vous présentons notre rapport sur les conventions et engagements réglementés. Nous avons deux catégories de conventions réglementées, les conventions et engagements soumis à l'approbation de l'Assemblée générale. Nous informons qu'il ne nous a été donné avis d'aucune convention ni d'aucun engagement autorisé au cours de l'exercice écoulé à soumettre à l'approbation de l'Assemblée générale en application des dispositions de l'article L225-38 du Code de commerce. Deuxième catégorie, les conventions et engagements déjà approuvés par l'Assemblée générale. Il y en a deux. Les redevances de location-gérance des fonds de commerce et location des locaux de stockage et des locaux administratifs avec certaines sociétés de groupe. Au titre de l'exercice 2020, des redevances de loyer ont été facturées à Thermador pour 574 000 euros, Sferaco pour 1 179 000 euros, Jetli 918 000 euros, soit un total de 2 671 000 euros. Ont été aussi facturées des redevances sur chiffre d'affaires pour Thermador 1 023 000 euros, Sferaco 808 000 euros, Jetli 1 255 000 euros, soit un total de 3 086 000 euros. Et enfin, une facturation de redevances matérielles pour 1 000 euros à Jetli. Autre convention réglementée, les engagements de rémunération envers les mandataires sociaux. Votre société s'est engagée à verser une indemnité à ses mandataires sociaux en cas de départ à la retraite. Cette indemnité pour départ à la retraite était calculée de la même façon que pour celle versée à un cadre salarié suivant les dispositions de la convention collective dont dépend votre société. Cette convention ne s'est pas appliquée sur l'exercice 2020. Votre conseil a précisé que cette convention est maintenue. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci à nos commissaires aux comptes.
Thank you to our auditors for their words, and thank you for their work, of course, and all the teams, the men and women who work for them. And of course, thanks to our in-house teams led by Patricia and Mavigny. Thank you for all that work.
Nous allons maintenant
So,
donner la parole
we're now going to
Thorsten, qui est le représentant
hand
de notre
over to
premier actionnaire,
Thorsten,
c'est le
who's our
premier
biggest
actionnaire
investor,
allemand,
German
un
investor,
actionnaire extrêmement fidèle,
a
mais
very
qui ne contente pas
faithful
d'être fidèle. C'est un
shareholder.
actionnaire avec qui nous avons des échanges
But,
réguliers. Nous ne sommes pas
so,
toujours d'accord. mais
it's
c'est
a
d'ailleurs
a shareholder with whom we have regular contact.
très,
We're not always in agreement,
de progresser.
and they're
Nous apprécions
they're
vraiment
challenging
leur
us always
regard
to
sur,
progress,
notre activité,
and they keep a
cette
keen
franchise.
eye on our
Et nous pouvons dire que
activity,
les
on our
conseils qui ont été
business,
prodigués ont été,
and the
bons.
advice they've given us in the past have always been
Merci
good.
à
Has always been good
l'actionnaire
advice. So thank you to
pour sa
that
fidélité. Maintenant, nous allons
investor.
écouter,
And now we're going to
Thorsten,
listen to Thorsten,
Hans, qui représente
Hans
l'actionnaire.
Thorsten, who's representing that share.
Mesdames et Messieurs, je m'appelle Thorsten Hans et je représente aujourd'hui l'Investment Aktiengesellschaft für langfristige Investoren. Qui sommes-nous? Nous sommes un fonds allemand composé de 240 entrepreneurs familiaux avec un horizon d'investissement à très long terme. 2020, quelle année? Il y a tellement de choses à dire sur 2020 que je ne sais même pas par où commencer. Des défis personnels pour chacun d'entre nous, des défis médicaux, politiques et tant d'autres. L'économie, bien évidemment, a été et continue d'être un vrai défi également, tant au niveau national que pour chaque entreprise individuellement. Il y a un an, lors de la dernière Assemblée générale, j'étais très inquiet. Nous étions tous très inquiets car nous étions dans un flou total. Quel impact de la pandémie sur notre supply chain, sur notre fonctionnement interne, sur nos différents canaux de distribution et clients? Et c'est pour ça que nous avions voté contre le versement d'un dividende. Et ça pour protéger notre groupe. Aujourd'hui, un an après, nous n'avons pas encore surmonté tous les problèmes, mais nous y voyons plus clair. Notre groupe a démontré une résilience exceptionnelle, une fois de plus. Dans un contexte sans précédent, nous n'avons pas seulement limité les dégâts, nous avons même eu des résultats en hausse par rapport à 2019. Qui l'aurait cru? Et cette réussite n'aurait pas été possible sans les 668 employés du groupe. Un très grand merci à chacun d'entre vous. C'est vous, votre passion et proactivité qui nous fait sortir de la crise actuelle plus fort et plus performant. Je souhaite également remercier la direction et les administrateurs du groupe, car la stratégie multicanal et multimarché mise en place depuis des décennies s'est démontrée une fois de plus extrêmement pertinente. À mon sens, le groupe Thermador est vraiment très spécial. On le voit dans plein d'aspects différents, que ce soit dans la qualité de votre rapport annuel, votre communication des crises, les nouveaux webinaires ou encore dans l'Assemblée générale de l'année dernière qui fut récompensée à juste titre. Je ne connais peu d'entreprises qui sont aussi transparentes avec leurs actionnaires. Bravo. Avant de conclure, je souhaite remercier Jean-François Bonnefond, président de Jetly et DGD du groupe. Un grand merci pour tous les travaux effectués dans le groupe depuis 20 ans. Vous avez été clé, pas seulement dans le succès de Jetly, mais vous avez été sans aucun doute un vrai pilier pour le groupe. Une retraite, ça se fait, et pour y contribuer, vous allez recevoir sous peu un petit paquet de la part de l'Investment Aktiengesellschaft für langfristige Investoren. Merci pour votre attention et bonne soirée.
Merci, Thorsten,
So,
pour ce
thank you, Thorsten,
témoignage.
for your
Nous allons
words. We're now going to
passer aux résolutions.
go to the resolutions.
Pour des
As you
problèmes
know,
techniques,
because of technical
nous préférons,
issues, we prefer to
avant
vote before
l'Assemblée générale.
the AGM.
Alors, les moyens techniques
So,
aujourd'hui nous donnent la possibilité.
technical,
Merci à tous ceux qui ont fait l'effort de
Techniques we have today allow us to do that. So thank you to all of you who did that
nous
in
n'avons pas
advance.
mis la possibilité, ça fait partie des questions que j'ai vu défiler sur
I saw a question on this.
nous n'avons pas pour l'instant la possibilité de
We can't,
voter
for the
en
moment,
ligne pendant
vote
le webinaire.
online during the
Ça
webinar.
demanderait une infrastructure
That would be
technique,
require a very complex legal
voilà,
and
les votes sont
technical
arrivés et sans plus attendre,
setup.
Pascal va commencer par les
So,
trois premières résolutions.
Patricia is going to start with the first three
Le résultat
resolutions
de ces votes.
and tell us the results of those votes.
La première
So,
résolution, nous en
resolution
avons 16
one.
au total. La première résolution, on est dans l'ordre du jour ordinaire. Donc c'est l'approbation
so it's
des
the
comptes
ordinary
annuels.
general meeting, the approval of the annual accounts. This was adopted above 99.9%. Resolution number 2, approval of the consolidated accounts, once again adopted at a rate exceeding 99%. Resolution 3, allocation of results. With a dividend at €1.82 per share, and this resolution was also adopted at more than 99%. So I'll just remind you that the dividend will be paid, it will be detached on the 13th of April, and it will be paid on the April the 15th. So I'm now going to hand over to a special guest. We're going to pay tribute to Jean-François Bonnefond, those who have received the reference documents. You'll see that we make a tribute to him in that document for his work and his person. And he joined us as commercial director for Jetly in '93. Then he led Jetly for 20 years. With great success, one of the big successes of Thermador Group. He's a great, not only is he a great professional, but he's also a very nice man. So we thought it would be nice to be able to invite him along and ask him to say a few words to us as a future pensioner. He's still a board member for a few hours, deputy CEO also for a few hours. Over to you, Jean-François. Thank you, Guillaume. So it's quite emotional for me to talk to you this evening, because I've been in this great group, Thermador Group, for 28 years. After 10 years with the Schneider Group, I was looking for a small company, and I wanted to be a shareholder. That was important for me. So in 1993, I was lucky enough to meet Guy Vincent and Hubert Fournier. I thank them for the trust they showed in me. Trust is a real big part of Jetly, and they allowed me great freedom, and I want to thank them for that. In these 20 years at the head of Jetly, I had a great team. We know about their financial performance, but it's all these people that I was able to meet in-house and externally, with superb customers, suppliers, partners. Once again, I'm very proud of my team and thank them. And it's now up to Frank, my successor, who will continue this great story. For several years, on the executive committee, on the board, with the other board members, at the head of the group, along with Guillaume and Patricia. I really found great pleasure in working with them, with my peers, and being able to contribute to this great group that I was so proud to belong to. So many thanks to Guillaume and to Patricia for their trust and for the good times we've had together. I'm going to hand over to Lionel, who's going to be the new deputy CEO, and I'm sure he'll do that job very, very well. I'm sure he'll do it even better than I did. So today, as Guillaume said, I'm a former employee, now retired. Not quite used to it, because it started just a few days ago on April the 1st. But I will, of course, remain a shareholder, and I will be a caring, trusting shareholder. After 28 years, I have a good idea of the power of the group and the people that lead it, but also I'll be demanding as a shareholder. And I'd like to end by thanking my wife and my 2 daughters, who really helped to protect my well-being at work during those years, and I'll be able to spend a bit more time with them now, and of course with my 2 granddaughters, who are waiting for me now in Miami. Thank you, Jean-François, for your words. I know you as a manager, I'm sure he's a great father, great husband. And now you're preparing for future as in your role as a grandfather. I'm sure you'll be exceptional in that role. Be careful, don't do everything for them, for those grandchildren. I'm sure we'll have the pleasure seeing each other in the future, discussing together. And if you become a stimulating shareholder, that would be great for us, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions or any of your criticisms or any of your concerns. So we also wanted to hand over to our potential future Deputy CEO. It's an important role because the board will confirm that tomorrow. It's an important position because it's part of the succession process in Thermador. If the CEO cannot lead the company, then the backup is the Deputy CEO. And that person is the person we're presenting you today, but of course you've known him for a very long time. And if you confirm the vote tonight, and if the board confirms his appointment tomorrow, it will be Lionel who will be the new deputy CEO, and he's got a very good handle on international affairs. Thank you, and he'll talk to you about that. Thank you, Guillaume. You talked about one of the challenges for the group in 21-26 will be to increase international business as part of our turnover. We see two levers. The first is organic growth, of course, and we'll be continue to rely on the 4 companies who do all the international business. 18% overall. The first will be Syfco, who sell all the group's products to wholesalers in Europe and Africa. And there's Sodeco Valves, which is in Belgium. They sell industrial valves to industry in Belgium, but also in the surrounding countries, Holland, Germany, Switzerland. And they've got dedicated sales teams for those countries. There's also FG Inox, which has an export department and sells its flanges and accessories in stainless steel to wholesalers and to final users in Europe and in Africa. So you could say those 3 companies will probably benefit from the end of the pandemic, towards the end of the summer, and we'll get the opportunity by the end of the summer to start visiting those companies again. There's also Rousseau, who has a subsidiary in Madrid, commercial subsidiary, but also stock warehouses, and they're selling to DIY warehouses, distributors. And of course, that range could be extended with products sold by DYPRA, since Europa DYPRA, Rousseau DYPRA will be moving together, we'll be merging pretty soon. The first then, the first theme was organic, but there's also external growth from next year, of course, and there we will study opportunities, companies of substantial size, especially in industrial valves, with the success of our operation in 2017 with Sodeco Valves. And we'll be looking at big markets in Europe, maybe in Germany, as the biggest industrial powerhouse on the continent. So those are priorities as of next year. Well, those are the main themes. So thank you, Lionel. Of course, if you have any questions, you just go ahead and ask Lionel any questions you might have on the question area of the webinar. So resolution number 4 was adopted more than 99%. So Lionel Munro is appointed as a new board member for 4 years. And tomorrow, during the board meeting of tomorrow, we'll vote on the question of him becoming deputy CEO, as a potential replacement to the CEO. Don't worry, I'm going nowhere, but you never know. Resolution number 5. So the different mandates need renewing. So all of them have been renewed. Laurence Pagani first, who's heads up the company Caporal, and who shows great openness and dynamism and has great experience, of course, as well. And so her renewal was adopted at more than 99%. Number 6 concerns the reappointment of Caroline Mignon. She represents private shareholders, and she was a shareholder of Thermador before she joined the board of directors. So her renewal was voted at more than 99%. Resolution number 7, Yanis Rentrop, who's our external board member, suggested to us by our biggest investor. Very hard worker, very assiduous, very specific about details, and a good representative for the institutional investors. And his mandate has been renewed with a vote of more than 99%. Resolution number 8. This is to approve the elements of executive earnings policy, and this appears in the URD on pages 34 to 37. And this resolution has been challenged a little bit because it was only adopted at 88%. So I want to represent the shareholders who voted against the resolution. Those institutional investors want more detail. They want more detail about the earnings of executives and how we decide to allocate earnings. We want to work on that and to improve our explanations so that those investors are satisfied. But it just seems to be more a question of presentation. Resolution number 9. We were asked to approve the amount, the annual amount allocated to independent members of the board, because we're going to need more work from them in the years ahead, and that was adopted more than 99%. Resolution 10, my earnings for 2020, the variable part. We asked the shareholders to validate, in particular, the variable component of my earnings. So that was adopted at more than 99.9%. So thank you for your support and your trust. 11, it's exactly the same thing, but for Patricia, and that was adopted again the same way, 99.9%. Thank you for her. On her behalf, she's done an awful lot of work, and a lot of work for the group. Resolution number 12, approval of regulated agreements. If you've got any questions about that, you can ask those to Patricia on the questions and answers space. Our regulated agreements are very simple, and they're adopted at 99.99%. There's also the special report of Frédéric Morel, which may be of interest. And that's in the universal registration document as well. Resolution number 13. We want to give us the ability to purchase Thermador Group shares at 91 euros maximum, but we need agreement from you in order to continue our operations on the stock market. So 13 is adopted at 99.96, and the idea of Resolution 13 is to bring on this Resolution 14, which is the ability to thank the employees of CEO and of AELO and Axelair, who showed great commitment, and as a startup, it took them some time to get to the break-even point, and of course that meant variable earnings were relatively modest, relatively low. So we want to try and thank them for their commitment over those years with this operation. It's a modest operation. It only concerns 3,000 shares. You've accepted that, 89.89%, and they will be allocated to the employees and executives of those two subsidiaries. So why did some shareholders vote against or abstain? I think the first is the institutional investors want us to think ahead more on this type of project. They would like us to announce objectives that need to be achieved before we suggest this sort of allocation. And the second, and some employees in the group voted against, thinking that they too might have received some free shares for their work, from their work in different subsidiaries. So that's just my interpretation. Resolution number 15, this was also challenged by the institutional investors in particular. So it was adopted at 83%. This resolution requires them to be a bit more rigorous administratively, because the idea was to change the threshold for indirect ownership of the share capital to make it compulsory to disclose, and the idea is to bring that down from 5% to 2%. But this helps us, Thermador Group, to understand to get to know our investors better, who sometimes are sort of hidden behind the smokescreen of middlemen and brokers. So it's just a way of getting to know them a bit better. So an initial assessment is that this move from 2 to 5 will only concern about 10 investors, and we'll have a full document on that next year. Resolution number 16, powers for formalities, was adopted at 99.99%, and now we're going to move on to our favourite exercise, which is the questions and answers exercise. So 2 questions. So because of the lockdowns, a lot of our working practices have had to change through the different lockdowns. So now that we can expect a switch back to normal, what changes are you imagining for our company? I like it when the company says our company. It shows a commitment to our group. I think he's talking about Thermador. And he should, and quite rightly, because he's a partial owner. So, without hesitation, I don't believe that home working increases productivity. I think it's a falsehood. Some people, maybe, some of our employees may gain from spending 1 or 2 days home working. Well, we'll certainly be thinking about that, but it could be difficult for others because they need to exchange with their colleagues. but under no circumstances would there be a gain in productivity. Maybe there'd be gains in terms of travelling time that could contribute to people working more effectively. We don't know. We tested this. And we tested it with the new measures, and we see that there aren't 100% of our employees are wanting to work from home. And of course, the problem is having communication between the different departments, and home working doesn't really help that. I think we'll just need some time to get used to it. Yes, so we will be keeping, of course, home working for those who want it and where it's possible in their job, because, of course, it can have a direct impact on the time spent by the employee travelling to work. And this time that they save on travelling, of course, they'll be able to use for their own enjoyment, as it were. So I'd say that most of the change will be just an increased use of home working. Second question. If the health situation improves in the second half of the year, will the company be able to organise an event in the second part of the year? I think it's a great idea because it's great to see each other physically. We thought that maybe we could do that in Paris because, of course, our Parisian shareholders are missing us, of course. And this could happen the second part of the year. Why not? We'll see. We'll see how the situation evolves from here on in. And of course, yeah, we would like to be able to see each other physically and to get some direct feedback from you, our shareholders. There's, of course, the Actionariat show. We don't really know whether that's going to be taking place. It's planned in November. And of course, if it does happen, then that will be an opportunity for us to meet our private shareholders. For the moment, we don't have much more detail about that. Of course, we don't know how the health situation is going to evolve. So, questions?
Celle de Claude Haroche, peut-être, non?
Oui, on va commencer par la première.
So, Claude Haroche.
Donc nous avons Monsieur Claude Haroche qui connaît bien le groupe.
He knows the group very well,
assez spectaculaire
and
la semaine dernière.
who saw a big drop last week.
Parce que déjà, ça m'intéressait à titre personnel de savoir ce qui se passait.
Of course, I'm interested to follow that personally, but also because I knew that you'd be asking that question. So, we identified the subject. It was actually a Luxembourg bank who made an administrative error in making an application in order to sell more than 6,000 shares. 1 minute from closing, and of course that emptied the order book. People who had placed orders to purchase maybe did a good operation, but in any case the shareholder sold the block, made a very bad operation, made a very unsuccessful operation because the share shot up again the next day. So it's just an incident, and it was just a technical error, I think. And something that you should never do as a shareholder right at the end of the day like that. And of course, because we're small-ish, then a big sale like that has an immediate effect. The stock exchange closed at 5:35, and that changes every day, of course, to
Après, il y a une question par rapport au
protect
futur
against
sur le 6 avril.
strategic selling or buying.
Bon, pour l'instant, enfin, on n'a pas forcément plus d'informations par rapport.
But we don't.
On n'a pas plus creusé ce point-là.
Ah oui, j'avais pas
Voilà.
vu effectivement
Non, il y avait le
le 6
moins
avril.
3, mais voilà, le 6
There was a
avril.
minus
la fluctuation
3%
entre le 30
on the
le
6th of
1er
April,
avril, et le 31 mars, c'est lié à cette banque.
and it's linked to that bank.
Le moins 3 d'aujourd'hui, très sincèrement, je ne sais pas.
So
du tout
the
si
minus
c'est
3
quelque chose.
today, I don't know
En
what
tout
that
cas,
could be.
Nous ne cachons rien de catastrophique qui aurait
We're
pu
not hiding anything
provoquer
catastrophic that could have
le sens de votre question.
caused such a drop.
Pour moi, pas
So
de raison objective,
there's no objective reason for it.
telle baisse aussi violente,
So sudden, so such a sudden move in a matter of a few
Nous avons
minutes
noté quand même depuis le début de l'année,
since the beginning of the year.
vous l'avez vu, des volumes importants et quand même un investisseur sans doute étranger qui est en
It
train de
seems that there's
constituer
a
un
foreign investor, institutional investor, who's building up for the long term.
pour son portefeuille. Ça a tendance sur une
That
période donnée
tends to
maintenir le cours à un
maintain
certain niveau.
maintain the price at a certain level.
Cet investisseur institutionnel
And when the
dit, voilà,
investor
j'ai constitué ma ligne,
Says, okay, I've finished building,
un impact
that can have a negative impact on the price, but it's just an hypothesis from me. I don't really, it could be something completely different. So, raw material prices, you talked about material price inflation in 2021.
Ce qu'on appelle en anglais notre price power.
So there's a question about our price power, our ability to pass on increase in raw material prices to customers,
Et notamment en fait envers les enseignes de grande distribution.
and especially
Il y a cette question-là, et
major
il y a
retail,
une question concernant les matières premières,
and also
enfin, les cours des matières premières
raw material prices, which fluctuate
qui ont un impact important
and have a
pour les filiales de Thermador.
major impact on Thermador Group subsidiaries.
Nickel.
So, on,
On a un
for
petit
example,
peu
copper, nickel, aluminium, a little bit. Are there any other?
également. Donc on a deux phénomènes. On a un phénomène
So there's a
de hausse
phenomenon
des
of
prix,
increase
et
in
on a un
price,
phénomène de rareté, notamment
but
sur
also
la partie
a
acier,
question of
qui
rarity,
effectivement conduit à des hausses de
and that, of course, increases
Sur la partie,
prices.
on peut peut-être parler de notre faculté à
Maybe you want to talk about
commerce.
our
Et je m'occupe de la finance.
ability on the sales side.
C'est vrai que dans le document d'enregistrement universel, nous avons
In the URD,
l'évolution
there's a page on
des marges sur une dizaine d'années et
margins over a period of 10 years,
nos équipes
and you'll see that
veillent à ce que
our
leur marge
teams are
d'exploitation, leur marge
careful
commerciale,
to protect
soit
their
stable,
operating margins so that they remain stable.
intéressés aux résultats des entreprises et des filiales. Donc ça explique notre bonne
So that
résilience sur la
explains
marge.
our good resilience in
Alors,
terms of
les questions
margin.
qui sont posées, on nous demande si,
Another question,
vis-à-vis de nos grands clients, grand public,
what about our retail
sont
customers?
acceptés,
Are
sont acceptés par
price
ce
increases
grand
accepted?
client, grand public,
Yes, they are,
comme on peut les citer, Leroy Merlin,
like Leroy Merlin,
Monsieur Bricolage,
Monsieur Bricolage.
Tous ces
for example.
grands clients-là, rencontrent les mêmes problématiques.
They've got the same problems of supply, and they know
Ce que nous exposons
that what we're explaining to them is true,
des hausses sont des raisons tout à fait justifiées.
and they're perfectly justified
Clients,
price increases.
fournisseurs et de matériel parce que
And of course, they absolutely need suppliers, so they've not questioned those rises. No.
nous passons des hausses. Oui,
Yes, we increase our prices, we pass them on to the customers,
et voilà, Patricia a parlé
and yes, our customers are receptive to those
des
increases.
devises.
What about
Patricia,
currency
sur ce sujet,
exchange
au niveau
rates?
de la holding, en ce qui concerne l'euro-dollar,
Pour l'ensemble des filiales.
There's the euro-dollar,
On
of
fait
course,
les
question.
achats
The
de filiales
purchases are hedged
en dollars.
in dollars,
Donc nous avons une politique de couverture
and so we have a hedging policy
qui peut en fait aller de 3 mois jusqu'à
Which
9 mois.
can range from 3 to 9 months.
Nous avons plus de 35% de nos, enfin, non, 33% de
And
nos achats qui sont payés en dollars.
33% of our purchases are paid for in dollars.
Monnaie chinoise.
So we
Ça représente 2% pour l'instant, donc c'est pas très significatif.
2% in Chinese yuan,
Sur cette partie-là, sur cette monnaie chinoise, nous ne faisons pas de couverture.
but there's no hedging on that part.
Ce n'est pas possible, mais pour
It's not
l'instant,
because it's
on
not
considère
possible,
que
but it's simply that the level is so low that it's not worth it. But we do have hedging on the dollar purchases, allows us to fix a rate, and that gives us visibility in terms of purchase price and, of course, the sales price. In terms of Thermador Group, there's no hedging on raw materials, but some of our suppliers have such purchasing power in terms of raw materials that they can cover their prices. So hi to our biggest supplier, Qualifi, who has a hedging policy on brass in particular, and that allows them to balance that kind of variation. Can we vaccinate against a recession and the crisis? Yeah, so we can imagine after the crisis, after the illness, we come out stronger. But of course, in certain cases, some companies won't survive. And I think Thermador Group will come out stronger because we've been able to face up to it together, and we've been able to put all the tools in place which allowed us to remain effective and agile. I don't believe in a vaccine for everything, but we are better prepared for a pandemic in the future. I would always say that the most important thing is to be able to have teams that are ready to face up to something that's unexpected and unplanned. You can write pages and pages on risk management, risk mitigation, but it happened to us in 2020. There's an unexpected risk, and you might have the best IT in the world. If you don't have the people, the staff, to deal with it, then it's very complicated. So we continue to work with our teams and applaud their resilience. What will happen when state aid stops? So at the end of the it's a subject that we talked about in the middle of last year. We talked about the payment deadlines for customers at the end of the year. We remain vigilant about our customer receivables because, of course, there's no guarantee about state aid to those companies to cover that risk. So we just have to trust in our staff, our managers, who keep an eye on their customers to know whether they're solvable over the period. So we remain vigilant, and within the group we're able to share information. And whenever there's an alert, that's communicated in real time to the other subsidiaries, so that we take positions which allow us to cope with, to mitigate such situations. So that's how we protect ourselves in respect of that. But of course, those are the indicators we'll be looking at very closely in the coming months. So it was an opportunity for some of our subsidiaries to perhaps pay closer attention to their customers. I wasn't able to vote by correspondence. Is there any other means than vote access to vote? No, I'm afraid the deadline was yesterday at 3 p.m. On vote access. If you're not happy with your bank, first piece of advice, there's plenty of other banks who can handle your portfolio, and if he has, ask the banker if he has vote access. So the possibility is to be an administered bearer, and that way we can match the voting sheet with the shares that you hold. So those are the advice I could give you on those 2 points, those 2 themes. So we continue with the questions. Claude in Aroche, Claude Aroche. Is MaPrimeRénov' Rénov.
Peut-être que vous en avez bénéficié à titre personnel. C'est vrai que c'est quand même une bonne façon.
It's a great way to invest. The Prime Rénov for renovations in your house.
Il y a l'impact de la mise en place de ces aides gouvernementales. Je vous invite à regarder les résultats de Thermador.
So I would invite you to, on the subject of Prime Rénov, you'll see that Thermador was the subsidiary that was the most impacted. So variations in turnover that you saw at Thermador outside their great ability to sell, of course, was from that measure, that government measure, subsidiary. And you say, isn't that a bit dangerous because it makes for big ups and downs in terms of business? We've had this kind of subsidy in the past, and we think this time that this measure will be with us for some time because it's a political message. It's citizens are thinking about the environment, are asking their political leaders for help, and I think that sort of subsidiary will be with us for a long time, at least 5 years. Is the Société Générale still present in the capital? No, left a long time ago, 2008 I think. It's called Kipio, and I don't think they are shareholders in Thermador Group. We met them, but they haven't bought any shares. They could be, of course, in the investment funds, and we don't see them. So we got some thanks and some congratulations. Please don't stop. A lot of employees on the webinar. A lot of employees amongst the number of 147. So we got congratulations, Guillaume, myself, and Patricia. But we would always say it's a result of everybody's work. So why not stop distributing the dividend to increase the company's equity? We did offer dividend in shares at one point in lieu of cash because there was a fiscal advantage, a tax advantage of doing it. But since that date, the tax no longer exists, so the advantage no longer exists, and we prefer to pay in cash. In terms of equity, why do we pay in cash? Well, I would say some of our shareholders, in particular the founder of the group, want the dividends paid in cash, so it's important to listen to them, respect their wishes.
Et il y a aussi le fait que si, pardon, je termine sur les dividendes en actions. Quand vous payez le
in terms of dividends in shares, so when you pay in shares, you create shares, so it dilutes the share, and that penalizes other shareholders. So we think there'd be too many shareholders who wouldn't agree with that. So I finished on that idea. It's not a bad idea. The idea of payment of dividends in shares. So our equity, we've built up our equity. It's fairly high already. And our capacity in terms of external growth is not limited by financial resources. The equity side. And since 2015, all our acquisitions have been financed with loans with very low rates, fixed rates, over 5 years, so it's relatively inexpensive. So loans cover all the company and allow us indirectly allow the dividends to be paid and the reimbursements to be met on the loans. But we don't need that equity because we have the banks. So just one subject, you saw in the figures that Patricia presented, when you add up the cash plus debt, you get to more or less to zero. So that just emphasizes what Patricia has said. Banks are happy to lend. There's no problem with getting loans from the banks. And there's a question of resources. We don't want to make acquisitions without being able to control those processes, the onboarding and so forth. So what are the target countries? I'm not going to go back on that because Lionel talked about it. Are you already in negotiations? No. What are the ratios you look at? We look at all the ratios. We do all the due diligence very carefully on potential acquisitions. We look at all the figures, but we also look at the non-financial aspects, synergies, potential synergies for our group and so forth. So what's the volume attributed to shares allocation? We fixed the maximum rate at 91 euros. We didn't talk about volume. And that's true, that's something we could improve in the writing of this resolution. We did fix the maximum price at 91 euros, but we didn't actually fix a volume. And we did buy 1,200 in 2016, and we still have those shares. And there's also those 3,000 shares that we talked about in Resolution 14. But yes, we could be more precise on that matter next year.
Alors des family office ou des particuliers. Alors les family office à l'origine, mais il faudrait qu'on donne la parole en temps réel à Thorsten, le fonds qui détient, qui est le premier actionnaire du groupe, était un family office, mais maintenant il y a beaucoup de familles, de mémoire de ce.
So there's lots of families in these investment. We talked about TGV earlier on, and there are a few blocks represented by different families. I don't think it has a major impact in terms of this question. So with a drop in 4.8% today in the share price, I don't have any explanation, as we've already said.
Alors, la crise du Covid vous a-t-elle incité à augmenter la part des fournisseurs européens pour éviter des ruptures d'approvisionnement ou des détails?
So did the COVID crisis encourage you to use more European suppliers? We have 34% coming from Italy, which is a large proportion, which has increased this year, and we also have with the purchase of Thermocome, we have the industrialist Acom, and they're French. They manufacture in France. So movements happen. We respect all our suppliers. We've been working with Asian suppliers for a long time, so we respect them, of course. No major change. We try to keep a balance. So between Spain, Italy, Germany, 59% of our supplies come from those countries, from those European countries.
Alors, un ancien salarié nous demande si nous serons présents sur le salon Polytech, si c'est possible, sans aucun doute.
So will we be at Polytech? A former employee asks us. Well, we hope so, if we can be. But
Polytech, c'est Spheraco,
S-
Sectoriel.
Probably Spheraco, Sectoriel, maybe Jet Li will be appropriate attendees at Polytech.
Des salons physiques.
We're looking forward to be able to get to shows.
Société Générale sans citer
So-
le nom du fonds.
When you talk about the Fonds Société Générale,
Des fois, c'est pas simple, et si vous le citez pas, nous, on n'aura pas la possibilité de vous répondre. Il y a une baisse régulière de la productivité
So,
fonds propres
there's
sur chiffre d'affaires.
a regular drop in
Ouais.
equity over
Baisse
turnover.
régulière. Alors là, vous rejoignez le sujet
And that's talking about the subject
ROCE.
of the ROCE.
Pourriez-vous, à l'occasion,
Could you
préciser,
talk about,
euh,
tell us
les
about
frais administratifs, commerciaux, logistiques?
what are the
Alors,
administrative
la dégradation
logistics
sur 10 ans
and
de
costs?
l'opération dans le groupe Thermador,
So the
est
the
plutôt la conséquence
decline of 10 years is the consequence of the acquisitions that we've made,
des sociétés
because the
nouvelles
new
qui nous ont
companies
rejoints,
who have joined us,
rejointes, pardon, ces sociétés-là, pour une part, n'avaient pas des ratios aussi forts que les
Um,
ratios consolidés du groupe.
some of them didn't have such good ratios, didn't have as ratios as good as ours.
Pour l'année prochaine, mais on leur donne
So
des éléments,
we give them
des éléments de comparaison,
elements
de
of
manière
comparison
à ce qu'eux
or
aussi
to help them
progressent à
to
l'avenir
improve their ratios
sur ces ratios.
in the coming years. So the explanation
C'est plutôt lié à ça,
is that it's linked to that, those acquisitions.
plutôt qu'à une dégradation. D'ailleurs,
There's
si vous
no-
regardez filiale par filiale,
There's no
vous
degradation.
voyez que
If you look at
les filiales historiques,
the analysis subsidiary by subsidiary, if you look at all the historic long-standing subsidiaries, their ratios are all stable.
Si vos gros actionnaires veulent du cash,
If your major shareholders want cash,
merci de votre réponse. Après, je préfère la rentabilité au taux du jour.
I prefer
Oui, alors,
profitability.
rien ne vous empêche, cher monsieur,
Okay,
vous touchez votre cash, de
when you,
réinvestir en actions.
nothing stops you from getting your cash from
from
buying more shares with the dividend, of course. So you can, of course, reinvest
votre cash en actions.
if you've negotiated well with your bank on terms of the fees you pay. We do that with the FCPE, the mutual fund, for the savings fund for the employees. It's a return of well above 15% a year. Thank you for your annual report, always very comprehensive. Thank you to you. I've been a shareholder for less than a year. Would it be possible to visit your sites after the COVID crisis is over? Yeah, we've already done that, especially for Parisian shareholders. We can organize this sort of event where you can meet the subsidiaries. That's something that was proposed at the beginning of the questions. When we'll be able to meet? Well, that's one solution, is to organize visits. And of course, we've invested in new, and we continue to invest in new buildings, and so that's worth visiting as well, of course.
Les investissements ont été de 10,6 millions l'année dernière de mémoire.
1.6 million last year investment in new premises, and 11.6 million, and something similar in 2021. There's the move of SG Inox, but also the AELO moving into their new premises, as well as Axelair in 2021. And a new logistics unit has been delivered for AELO. So it seems we've answered all the questions that were on the chat, on the questions session. So our meeting lasted 1 hour 40. Thank you to the 140 people who are still connected. That's a strong message for us. To stay on a webinar for 1 hour and 40 minutes shows a certain degree of determination. So thank you very much. Hervé, last question. It's thank. Great work for the people working in the background, and congratulations to them. And that's Hervé Le Guillaume, who worked for the group for many years. was recruited at Sferaco as commercial director, and then was head of Sferaco, and then he was deputy CEO before Jean-François. And so we're very happy to have him on the call today. And so thank you for your little message, Guillaume. And could we just maybe say that the logistics teams are people who were there physically in the warehouses during the crisis, but during the first lockdown in particular, they had to be there the whole time, and because we had to receive the merchandise and prepare the orders for our customers. So I think, yeah, we can really emphasize their commitment and the fact that those teams just went to the front, as it were, and were able to trust in all the procedures that were in place, the health of a sanitary process in place. Hervé's metaphor about the people working in the dark, shall we say, not in the dark, but there are people working in warehouses which are getting old. So we've renovated those, and the working conditions are much better. And they don't work in the dark. They work in natural light where it's possible, or in LED light, which of course gives a very good lighting effect, and that's important for the quality of life at work for our employees. So thank you all. I wish you a very good evening, and we'll be meeting again for the quarterly results on the 16th of April. On the 15th, we will be sending the turnover results by web. On the 16th, you'll receive the letter in your letterbox. And on the 16th in the evening, you'll be able to watch us live for the results of the first quarter of 2021 commercially. Thank you to all of you, and have a great evening. Good evening.